From the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with a winter storm update webinar as of 11:30 this Wednesday, February 17. And so we've got another winter freezing rain event here. And what has changed? Nothing has changed. Everybody should have received, and this is posted on our webpage, this set of slides. That was issued like around 5 or 6 in the morning. I haven't really made any changes to the slides, so because nothing really has changed, but compared to yesterday you may recall we had winter storm watches out for the counties that touch I-85 and northward, and obviously we've expanded that overnight, went with a winter storm warning and a winter weather advisory for a tier of counties south of 85 and south of Randolph County, so in the northern I-95 corridor. So that's really from 24 hours ago what's changed. Certainly this weather system that's headed our way is part of the series of storms that impacted the southern plains in Texas, and certainly we're going to finally get our part of the impactful weather. Maybe not as bad as say Texas had it a couple days ago, but certainly it's not going to be. We're looking at a more impactful event, I guess I should say. So what's going on right now? Of course, we've got snow that's falling in the mid Mississippi Valley. The orange on this radar precip type map is sleet. This is freezing rain, and this is rain. And you can see the temperatures here. And as I kind of alluded to yesterday when we did our webinar, the mountains block the cold air from coming right at us from the west. The cold air has to build to our north and then slowly make its way down east of the mountains, and that's how cold air gets to us. And that is underway right now. Look at the temperatures. These are current temperatures here across our area. You could see readings in the 30s and 40s compared to yesterday when it was 15 degrees or warmer than what these readings show right now. So despite the sunshine, we're holding in the 30s right now. It should warm up into the lower 40s, as we head through the afternoon. But notice when I overlay the wind, look at these wind directions. That's from the north and northeast. All these winds you see right here are from the north and northeast. So what that means is the temperatures, and more importantly, the dry air at the surface is going to be reinforced as this dry air. And these numbers, by the way, are dew point values. Okay, so it's a measure of moisture. And the air is blowing from the north, where the dew points are in the teens and even single digits, and transporting it to places where dew points are in the 20s. And why is that important? Because whenever the initial batch of precipitation moves, when it moves, into our area tonight, even though it may start out very briefly as rain, what will happen is that when that rain falls into very dry air, when rain falls into dry air and evaporates, that cools the atmosphere. Okay, so the drier the air, the better the greater that is of the cooling that occurs. So while we currently have temperatures, and these are air temperatures now, well above freezing. Tonight, after it cools down, and there might be enough clearing, it might not be super cloudy later where there could be a little bit of radiational cooling. But even if there's not any radiational cooling, the air is dry enough that when the initial precip falls into it, it'll drive the temperature down and get us at or below freezing across a large part of central North Carolina. Again, those dew points in the teens and single digits headed into our area is an important aspect of this whole weather system. Okay, so going back to our slides, freezing rain is obviously the main consideration and concern starting late tonight through Thursday night. And I'll show you why the duration of this is going to be longer. It's almost like in two waves, if you will. But as we typically say with these types of events, along and north of 85 is where we still think the greatest amount of ice will accumulate. Okay, and as I'll show here in a moment, there could be ice even further south, but not as much, and I'll show you why there. So obviously, if you think back to the ice event that happened last week, if you think back to that, if you saw ice last week, you're going to see ice tonight and tomorrow. Okay, that's almost a slam dunk. Okay, the difference is the ice may be a little bit further south than it was last week. Okay, if you had power outages and if you had hazardous travel last week with last week's ice, you're certainly going to have it again with this event. Okay, so be prepared. Definitely advise folks in your area, residents and business owners, that there's potentially, remind all your constituents in your area that there's going to be power outages, and perhaps for quite an extended period of time due to the icing. Remember, there's a lot of trees that came down last week, and there's a lot of trees that maybe started to come down but didn't finish. So this icing event should bring down whatever trees are already leaning. Now, I will point out some sleet is possible and may possibly mix in with this mess, primarily north of 85. And that's why we went with a winter storm warning rather than an ice storm warning, because there could mix in with a little bit of sleet. But regardless of whether it's a winter storm warning or an ice storm warning, it's going to be a lot of problems. So anyway, and then as the text at the bottom says, by midday Thursday, all precipitation will fall as rain and freezing rain, no sleet or snow expected. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump to, let's see, what do we want to show next? Let's jump to the wave here. And this is basically a radar simulation with precipitation type overlaid. Okay, and this is one of literally dozens of models that we have. All right, so you can see the time there at the top, and I'm going to take you through this. Here's tonight, or this evening, I should say, this evening. And as we head into the overnight hours, remember I said at first it's going to come down as rain, and that's what green means, rain. Because temperature is going to be above freezing, but we're going to have dew points in the teens. So when this rain falls into those low dew points, guess what happens to the surface temperature? It plummets. So anyway, and then finally we see that transition to freezing rain overnight. So we're talking, freezing rain begins after midnight, and then heavier precip moves in, and it gets underway. So basically during the overnight, two things are going to be happening. Number one, the rain's going to eventually change over to freezing rain, and number two, the overall precip amount and rates will be increasing. There'll be more moisture headed our way and more precipitation falling. Okay, so by 5 a.m., pretty much a large chunk of central North Carolina is seeing either sleet, maybe even some snow getting mixed in near the northern I-77 corridor and up near the Virginia border. Perhaps even as far south as Winston-Salem or Greensboro might see a touch of snow come 6 a.m. tomorrow, with rain confined mainly to the South Carolina border counties. Okay, but everywhere else in between will probably be cold enough for some freezing rain come 6 a.m. tomorrow. And that's why we extended the winter weather advisories much further south. Remember, the winter weather advisory is basically from here south, and then the winter storm warning is basically at Terricorn counties north. Okay, so anyway, that's why we've extended that winter weather advisory as far south as we did, because any amount of freezing rain triggers a winter weather advisory. Okay, so ice could get down as far south as Stanley, Montgomery, Moore, Lee, and Harnett counties. So certainly that's it could be a little. That's why I said earlier if it could be a little further south than what we saw last week. The good news is it doesn't appear to last that long, because as I'm stepping through these times, by 9 a.m., look how the border between ice, that is freezing rain, the pink, and the green, which represents rain, look how that's retreating northward. Okay, so by midday Thursday, it's primarily along and north of 85, where it typically hangs on the longest. Okay, but look at the rates, they're also decreasing. So by midday afternoon tomorrow, it's really, really patchy, and some might think, oh, it's over. Okay, good, we can wrap this up. How much freezing rain really could accumulate in just a couple hours? Okay, you might be wondering, well, hang on here, because it's not done. Here comes wave number 2 coming in by 5 or 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. So it almost comes in 2 waves. And then tomorrow evening, now we're getting right back into it, and particularly along and north of 85. All right, and then that continues pretty much through the late evening hours, and gosh, it goes on until midnight tomorrow night before it finally exits. Okay, so there's two waves. If we just had this first wave, then maybe it wouldn't be so bad. If the first wave right here, from basically 2 a.m. Thursday to noon Thursday, if that was it, then things wouldn't probably be quite as impactful in terms of power outages and trees down, or maybe even road conditions. But the fact is this second wave comes in late in the day and then just continues to pile on the ice. But the good news is at this point, by the time the second wave gets to us, it's mainly confined to the places that typically have the worst of the winter weather. We're talking along and north of 85. So that's why I said earlier, if last week you had problems with ice accumulation and trees down and hazardous travel with last week's ice, you're going to have it again. And it's going to be just as bad, if not maybe a little worse, because you get both waves of freezing rain. And I also said that if you're a little further south of 85, you might see it, more than what you saw last week. And that's because this first wave might push as far south as, the mid coastal plain, in terms of north to south. It may push as far south as, say, the Highway 24 corridor, perhaps. So, but even there, it's not going to last that long. Okay. So anyway, that's the way things are shaping up, and that's why we have the advisories we do. Okay. Now, this afternoon, obviously, we're going to do another one of these webinars because we're going to reevaluate and see if we need to add anything further to the east. But right now, the thinking is that it'll be so brief, from, say, Fayetteville. Well, let's just say the central and southern I-95 corridor. You might see, even if you see any kind of freezing rain, it's going to be so brief that we don't have any advisory. But if something pushes us towards, a little bit more in the way along the central I-95 corridor, obviously we may expand that advisory. And that's why we're going to have another webinar at 5 p.m. today to bring you any updates. Okay. So anyway, all right, let's jump right to the, because I've already showed this. Let's jump right to how much. Okay. So clearly, along and north of 85 and maybe extending a little bit further south of 85 down toward Asheboro, that's where we expect the most widespread power outages, the most widespread tree damage, and the worst of the road conditions. Okay, because not only, with a half inch of ice, not only are you going to have bridges that are icing up, but probably even regular surfaces too. So anyway, and then we get into a really tight, what we call gradient or transition from where there's nothing to where there's a lot. So somewhere in between here, this gradient could move either direction. Okay, and certainly it could be, the places on the southern end of this could get a little more, or it could be a little less. It just depends on how long that morning wave that I spoke of lasts. Remember, this is going to come in two waves. The morning wave, which is what gives us the freezing rain on the southern end of this, okay, and then both waves, which gives you this higher amounts on the northern end of this. Okay. So that's how this right now appears to play out, and that's why we wanted to have two webinars today, because things we'll be able to get the latest information with the afternoon model packages and put this all together for you. But certainly just want to raise awareness that if you're along, if where you live, your county touches I-85 or maybe even a bit south, you're probably going to have some power outages to deal with for a while. All right. In terms of rainfall, yesterday we touched a little bit on rainfall. Although I don't want to leave the southern coastal plain and Sandhills region out, because for those areas that aren't going to get any freezing rain, you're going to have some impactful weather too, and it's namely going to be in the form of just heavy rain. So 1.5 to 3 inches of rainfall could cause some localized flooding. River flooding is already occurring, and obviously it'll only get, perhaps even a little worse with this additional rain. And certainly, we do expect some moderate flooding is forecast, particularly across eastern portions of the area. So definitely want to encourage you to, if you have concerns with locations near any of our main stem rivers, definitely check out the hydrographs, the forecasts at these links provided below, and I'll be emailing these slides out, or you should already have them in your email. Okay. So anyway, just to kind of reiterate, 2 waves, one tonight and tomorrow morning, and then the ice and freezing rain line retreats northward. The second wave comes in. By then, it's warmed up enough over, say, most of the triangle down towards Sanford and Troy, where it should be just pretty much rain. But north of there, along and north of 85, that second wave is going to come in also as ice. And that's why we get numbers, in excess of a ½ inch of ice accumulation. A ½ inch of ice causes a lot of problems. I mean, imagine all the tree damage and power outages that occurred last week with 3/10. Okay, so in many places, this will be twice as much ice as we had last week. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're preparing. All right, so that wraps up this briefing. We're going to do another live webinar at 5 p.m. And unfortunately, I couldn't do it at 4:30 because of a conflict, scheduling conflict. But we will be here at 5 o'clock, and I'm going to go through some of the questions